I'm David Schwartz, and we're here with Herb Berman for TOS50.com. And Herb Berman is a legendary New York political figure, a former councilman for over 20 years. You were the finance chairman for 20 years, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Let's talk about a little history.
First of all, thank you for those nice words.
You're welcome. So when were you a councilman?
I was first elected in March of 1975, 2 weeks before the fiscal crisis hit. It was strictly coincidental, by the way. My being elected the first time had nothing to do with the crisis. And I finished my term on December 31st, 2001, so it's almost 27 years.
27 years, and you spent 20 years as the finance chair.
No, excuse me. I spent 12 years as a finance chair, and prior to that time, for about 10 years, I was the education chair. I had jurisdiction over CUNY and the Board of Education.
And for those that don't know, next to the speaker, the finance chair is probably the second most powerful position.
Arguably it was, yes.
Yeah. So can you tell us about those years and what the city was like during those years in a nutshell?
Well, if you want to do that, then you have to really go back to the fiscal crisis that came about on April 1st of 1975, when the city of New York could no longer go to market to sell its bonds. And the reason for it was that they had been playing around with the various budgets. They were paying expense items with capital funds. Capital funds, for anybody who's interested, are the funds that are used to improve the infrastructure, the streets, the highways, the buildings, etc. Expense pays salaries. You are forbidden to use capital dollars to pay for expense items, but they were doing it at that time. And after a while, the rating agencies say, we're not going to recognize your bonds anymore, and we couldn't go to market. Can't go to market, then you can't pay your bills. You collect taxes, but you only collect taxes several times during the course of the year, but you have to pay your bills every week. So you get the money, you raise the money to pay your bills by selling bonds and notes, city bonds and notes. And that gives you the ability to pay it. We couldn't do that. We were on the verge of bankruptcy. Nobody in the country had ever experienced, no city had ever experienced a bankruptcy before. We had no idea how it would impact upon pensions and city debt, etc. And there was a sense of panic. And we lost thousands upon thousands of people from the city payroll. As a matter of fact, now where you have about 35,000 men and women on the police force, we went down at that time to about 18,000. And crime became rampant in the 70s. And I think that the police have fixed the motto, the unions have fixed the motto, calling us Sin City at that time. And we were really going down a drain. And Ed Koch was elected mayor. And Ed Koch, scrupulously to his credit, adhered to sound fiscal policies, sound budgeting. Hugh Carrier as governor, who's probably the untold hero of that entire time because he stayed with the city and got us help in creating the Financial Control Board and the Big Mac Board, issuing the Big Mac bonds. It's a fascinating time, but we came out of that morass and we slowly evolved, and to the extent that we are now, and have been for quite a while, the safest city, large city in the United States. Our bonds are beautifully rated, and we're in excellent shape. As a matter of fact, I remember that on a regular basis, after we started coming out of our fiscal problems, representatives from other cities and other states were coming to New York to ask us what we did to get out of our problems. So we became the poster boy for good fiscal policy, and it's still happening.
It seems like Mayor Giuliani likes to take most of the credit for the renaissance of New York City. But in your opinion, who should? I know Ed Koch gets a lot of credit, and even Mayor Dinkins, Safe Cities program,
well,
Safe Streets, Safe Cities.
You know what? Ed Koch clearly brilliantly led the city during that time. David Dinkins, we, the city council, Peter Vallone, myself, and the others are the ones who introduced the Safe Cities program Dave Dinkins expanded it to the Safe City, Safe Streets, where he wanted to include social programs as well to bolster the efforts to keep people off the streets when getting into trouble. So he was clearly an important part of it, and Rudy Giuliani was clearly an important part of the process that evolved, because, you know, it was intimidating to drive to a corner and suddenly being besieged by squeegee boys who would leap upon your car. And a lot of people in retrospect say, well, they were only squeegee boys, but it was intimidating. And if you're a woman alone behind the wheel and suddenly two guys are wiping your window and demanding money, it's frightening. He addressed it. He addressed a lot of the basic issues, the things that made life comfortable.
Graffiti on the subways.
Graffiti on the
subway. It made
subway.
you feel better to ride the subways.
Clearly. Do you know that our mass transit system is now the safest mass transit system probably in the world?
It's amazing. Who could have ever thought way back when in the 70s that you would be speaking like this, that we are the safest city, that we
Never.
have the best? You probably couldn't have never foreseen that.
No, I think it was a remarkable transformation, and the city has a lot to be proud of. And I'm very fearful that there could be a few steps backwards. The one thing that was very important is that we had a fiscally sound state government back in the 70s. You don't have that now. The state government is not fiscally sound, and I fear that will have a negative impact upon the city.
That is a great piece of history, and hold that thought, because we're going to go to part 2 and we're going to talk about the future.
Great, thank you.